I will. I'll keep everything muted and hidden. But I think
And then I'm gonna kick you out because then it's less people on the screen. So
the only issue, Paul, is I think last time you kicked me out, I couldn't rejoin later on.
Oh, okay. Well, let me try again.
Okay.
Please.
Your concern is duly noted. Let me try again. Oh, shoot.
I don't know. We have too much fun, guys. I don't know.
I think he's good. I think he's back in the attendance. Liam, I think raise your hand, Liam, if you can, if you're good. I think you're good.
Try again.
Now I got the YouTube playing in the background. All right, we are live on YouTube. And Betsy might just be a little bit, she has some technology issues. So my guess is she might be a couple minutes late. So Peter, did you want me to do any screen sharing for you while you chair the meeting? Or do you want to just do you want to do it if somebody references a certain section, or it's up your call?
Yeah, no, you're probably a lot more technical savvy than I am. So absolutely.
Okay, so we'll have, so you're going to chair it, but I'll just if it makes sense to pull up a certain section, I'll do that. How's that sound?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, I think I'm going to get started. So welcome everybody. This is the Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 virtual town council workshop. And this is in regards to our TIF policy. We'll do a quick attendance. Tom, you want to take a quick attendance?
Certainly. Councilor Clucci.
Here.
Councilor Hayes.
Here.
Councilor Katarina.
Here.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor Hamill.
Here.
Councilor Gleistein.
She is here. She just popped in.
Okay. And Chairman Johnson.
Here. So with that, I think I've told everybody here, but for those that are in the audience and watching at home, Mr. Peter Hayes is our chair of finance, and I think it's safe to say finance has spent the most time with this policy. So Peter is going to chair this workshop, and I'll help him out on the back end, pulling up certain sections of the policy if need be. So with that, Peter, it is all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining everybody tonight that's in the audience, possibly listening in. Yeah, this policy, I think, Tom, has been around for the better part of a year, probably in various different forms of review. I think where did it start? Did it start in
Rules and Policies, and as I recall, it started immediately on the heels of the Crossroads CEA being approved in December of 18. So it was the spring of 19 that this started in Rules and Policies.
So I think they took sort of a first crack at the text here, and then it then came to the Finance Committee, and we have gone sort of back and forth on it on different revisions, different changes, and actually different Finance Committee members. Both John and Betsy have contributed to this version. I think this was distributed earlier to town council members and available to the public. And with that, I'm not sure what the pleasure of this group would be. I think at this point, people have had a chance to see it and study it. I didn't know if there's any comments, questions, any place you'd like to have greater detail. The Finance Committee is here to talk about it, and I'm sure Tom can bail us out. This was sort of a co-authored document that has lived in many forms.
Yeah, Peter, if I could, maybe I'll just, for purposes of the council and your discussion, this policy is really specifically focused on economic development TIFs with CEAs. And it's really the CEA component that is the impetus behind the policy. There was some talk at the committee level that there may need to be companion policies for other types of credit enhancement agreements, the affordable housing kind. But this policy was not drafted with that in mind.
And I think just some highlights as you go through it, that kind of, sets out the purpose, which for purposes of public, I can read. The purpose of this policy is to outline standards and processes of the town of Scarborough will use in initiating or considering applications for tax increment financing, TIFs, and for credit enhancement agreements. Notwithstanding this policy, the creation of a TIF district and adoption of a development program is a decision made on a case-by-case basis by the Scarborough Town Council and the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, Maine DECD. must also review all TIF districts for statutory compliance. So that was sort of the architecture. It goes through some rules and conditions, and then it kind of talks about the process by which it will happen. Councilor Gleason then actually introduced a sort of scoring matrix that we can use to kind of evaluate the different CEAs that come in front of us and TIFs, and kind of use it as a way to kind of help guide the town staff in assessing whether they want to bring it forward to the council, and some criteria for the council to use, and possibly trying to decide which ones that come before the future town councils make sense based on some criteria. So with that, I don't know if there's any questions from the councilors or comments from the councilors as we work on this. Councilor Gleason, I think I saw your hand go up first, so.
Yeah, so I just want to make a couple of comments. So we've worked, and Tom can attest to this, we worked to kind of try to clean up the language, and I'm not saying we did it perfectly, but it's unlikely. We have a very large TIF district, which is a tax increment financing district that will expire in about 26, 27 years. So certainly there may be others that come along after it. And again, this isn't related to affordable housing, but it's probably unlikely that we'll have another TIF. So this is really focused on CEA, or the Credit Enhancement Agreement. And people, will get those terms mixed up a little bit. And we tried to clean that up in the document to make it clear that, what makes a TIF unusual is how much we're putting aside to shelter from the tax dollars, and whether or not we're giving tax dollars back from that TIF to the requester. So even if a TIF is not requested, this policy will come into play. And in terms of the scoring, we kind of talked about how do you look at subjective data and try to make it as objective as you can in terms of ranking and point scales. So the idea would be the person who's requesting a CEA would actually rank themselves on a point scale. And I would like to say that, this is the first time we're workshopping this. Hopefully you guys have seen it. If there's other scoring values that you think we should be looking at, or the point scale isn't quite what you think it should be, that is definitely an area where you should weigh in, because that ultimately should be the point scale should be something that reflects all of us as our values as a town. And so at that point, we would either, there's a couple of different ways we can go. The finance committee at that time can score it against the point scale. We could all score it, and then, some or average the scores or things like that. But it allow us to kind of look at things relative to each other. So if something hits all the boxes, it's actually going to score pretty high. If it doesn't, it may not make it to the next level. So I think that's kind of at this point what I wanted to add, Peter.
Thank you. Councilor Caterina, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I have a couple questions. The first one is, I know the TIF and CEA policy is pretty well set in state statute. So I was curious, number one, do surrounding towns have this policy or scoring system? And the reason I ask that is just for, so we aren't reinventing a wheel here. And secondly, I'm a little bit concerned that I don't want to be boxing in any potentially creative or good CEAs that come along in the future. Maybe right now this scoring system will work, but in a different economic climate or whatever, maybe it wouldn't. And also, I'm assuming, but I should never assume, that the Ms. Mueller, our attorney, has weighed in on thoughts on this. So I'm just curious, has she weighed in? What are her thoughts or feedback? And is this something that's being done in other towns? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so there.
I know it's a lot, sorry.
No, there are a couple of questions there. Tom, I see your hand. I know Betsy will probably have some. Tom, whatever parts of those questions that Jean Marie.
Yeah. Let me take a stab at as many of them as I can get to.
Yeah.
At the outset, Jean Marie, we did do a kind of statewide search. There certainly are other examples. As I recall, the starting point really focused on Freeport's and Portland's policy.
Okay.
I think we've kind of come a fair distance from those starting points, frankly, at the ending document. We did consult with the town attorney, Shauna Mueller, initially, but we've not really brought her into the process since. So she's not looked at the draft as it currently is constructed.
Is there a plan to have her do so? I mean, just to let us know if there's anything that triggers something that may not be up to snuff with what the state statutes and regulations are.
Sure.
Excuse me, around this.
Sure, I think that would be probably wise to make sure that we're not in violation of any statutory requirement. But at the end of the day, this is a policy and it's a legislative action of council. So I think she'll stop short of advising whether it's the right thing to do or not.
Right.
I think she can offer an opinion about its compliance with state law.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yep.
Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I thought this was great work, and I know it's gone a long and winding road to get here. So I think it was thorough, comprehensive. You know, I like the notification requirements. You know, I kind of went back and forth on the scoring system. At first, I thought it was a little onerous and maybe a little bit too much, but I think it's a nice addition. I think it would be a useful tool to screen applicants, and I don't really lie in fear that it's, you know, it's going to be seen as a hurdle that's too high for serious applicants to get over. So I kind of like that, those features and those aspects of it. So I did have a couple questions. One was, is it current practice to require master plans or subdivision plans to be developed fully before an applicant, is seeking a TIF or a CEA?
I can certainly address that. It's not typical that they have completed that. It is typical that before it starts or before it's finalized that they would have that in place, or before it starts, but not before.
Okay.
And as Councilor Gleifstein foreshadowed earlier, to the extent that we are considering CEA requests within existing TIF districts, they're likely to be lot specific. I'm not, not for certain, but more often than not, I would expect it would be for a single lot. So it wouldn't be subdivision, but certainly site plan. And gaining this sort of financial partnership with the town would likely be a pretty important part of the initial due diligence. So as Karen said, I wouldn't expect it to be in hand at the time of application, but certainly incorporated and made part of any final decision.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Councilor Gleifstein?
Yeah, so I think those were all great points. I think having the town attorney look at it is a good idea to make sure, the law is fairly straightforward, and but it never hurts to make sure. So the scoring system, we had from the initial draft, there was a lot of questions that the applicant would have to answer. So we had, just several questions, like 10, 15, 20 questions value you bring with this. And then we actually had the state application in, which had pages and pages of questions that the applicant has to answer, not for CEA, because that's more of our purview, but for a TIF. And so we actually removed that. So we're trying to cut down the barriers for the people that are coming forward. So we consolidated down the questions. We took out the state TIF application, because in reality, as we talked about it, if there is another TIF, that's us, the town of Scarborough, who's applying for that TIF. That's not the actual person who, is going to do the development. They will, of course, work with us, but they will actually, we will actually apply for the TIF through the state, because we're trying to talk the state into letting us shelter revenue. And so the CEA, we wanted to focus on what value they believe they're bringing to us in order to get a tax rebate from the new value that they would bring. And so we consolidated, I think, Tom, you took a couple of the questions and we even kind of, meshed them into the scoring system. And we're not going to be tied to a hard and fast scoring system. I want to say another thing. We also talked as a committee about, do we want to say, what's a threshold that we even want to work on this at all? And we pretty much decided we don't want to shut the door on anything. We want it to be able to go through some level of the process, which at the very first one is through SEDCO. So there was discussion about how early do we want to even say, this isn't even anything anybody should be talking about. But we were very careful not to shut those down because anything is worth trying to take it forward. I think the one of the main goals was to try to get the council informed a little earlier. I think that is probably will help overall in terms of people understanding what's being requested and what we might need, or et cetera, et cetera. And so those were some of the overlying goals. Certainly, if people have amendments or they think things should change, I would certainly encourage people to do that. But we definitely did not have a goal of shutting it down. It's more transparency and getting good information and trying to put some kind of rational way. I mean, we could still look at something. I don't know if you guys have ever worked on scoring systems like this, but every now and again, you score something and it comes out at 30, but your gut still tells you, what, this is something we ought to be doing. There will still be that subjective part of that, but this will allow the person requesting the CEA to tell us, how well do they meet, new energy guideline, what do they think they're providing on that front and value for the value of the town? And then we can listen to them and say, yeah, we think you do provide that, or no, we don't think you do. So that was some of the goals. It's not perfect. I'll tell you that. It was, when I first heard about it, I'm like, oh, this is a no-brainer. It was much more difficult than it seemed like it would be. So
if I could, Peter, I just want to follow up on Councillor Gleistein's point. The scoring matrix in Appendix C, there was quite a bit of discussion at Finance Committee about whether there should be a minimum score to be attained to kind of move through, and there was a decision not to include that. I wonder if we should be explicit in that regard, if that would be helpful, that to actually state that there need not be a minimum score. I think this process was really intended to be consistent and to bring every project through the same sort of process and to encourage kind of critical thinking on these major, I'll say policy objectives or priorities, however you want to characterize them. Do you think that would be helpful to just add a sentence to maybe the Appendix C that talks about no minimum score required and what the purpose of this exercise is intended to do?
I personally think that would be fine. I think, one of the other things we added is that besides staff time, if we incur outside costs, if we hire a consultant to look at this, if we have a legal fees, that's going to be on the dollar side of, once, even after they use up the deposit we're going to ask for them to put down, that's going to be on them to pay for our expenses to look at the CEA. So if somebody came out with a low score and they think, well, I probably don't have much chance of getting this through, and there's a lot more expenses to come, they may say, I'm not going to go forward. But yeah, I personally don't have a problem with adding that, because I think, any kind of policy personally, I think you certainly want to use it a little bit, and it may become apparent that, let's put a minimum on this. But before that, I think you kind of want to use the tool and the policy and see how it's working. So that would be my opinion on it, Tom.
Okay.
And actually, just to build on a little bit, and I think, Councilor Hamilton, just to kind of build on your question and a little bit of Councilor Caterina's, I think our objective at a 30,000 mile view was to, the anticipation is that we may get more of these applications down the road as we do these sort of deals in economic development. And what we really wanted to do was just maybe create a more sort of objective way for them to come through the pipeline rather than subject, at least have some mechanism that kind of the staff can kind of use to determine whether it should be brought forward. Certainly are for the way for the town council in their future to kind of look at past and future deals. I do think there should be a concern about how do we make sure we consistently apply sort of some of our rationale and thoughts. I know, as a city councilor, sometimes it's hard to know what was decided before you actually, so I think it was all of that to be clear. Tom, to get to your point, I think remaining silent on it is fine. We're not really, we didn't say there is a minimum. We just, we really just said we really trust future town council members that this gives, in my opinion, when we drafted it, it was really drafted in a way that will give town council members of the future some tools to use, but nothing that ties their hand to any particular course of action. They can, ultimately the decision is the sitting town councilors as these come before them. But we just wanted to provide a framework that would bring some consistency to how we evaluate these past, present, and future, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, agreed. I'm just trying to avoid, I guess, the case that Jean Marie mentioned, which the applicant will do self-scoring and it scores a 35, let's say, and without any word otherwise, that may discourage what otherwise is an interesting and good application that ought to go forward and maybe be approved because of a low score in the first instance. That was the only thing I was trying to address.
But Tom, as our process, I mean, it will go through sort of a coaching phase with SEDCO first, and then kind of before it even gets to the town council, right? So I think those types of messages certainly could be encouraged. I just think in the future, we're going to want to have a way that if we do say no to a particular application and yes to another, that we've got something to point at, so we're not looked at as being in any way sort of discriminatory or so. Sort of from those perspectives, but certainly open to what others think. I just point of clarity though for I think the chair. This is on the agenda tonight to be approved, I think. So if we, isn't it?
Yeah, Peter, I think we're just doing the public hearing tonight, and then we're gonna vote on it in a week, 2 weeks, I think. Let me double check.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so it's just a public hearing, I'm sorry, okay. So,
Yeah, we're just doing the public hearing tonight. Yep.
great, so, okay, I thought we were trying to go from here, okay, great. Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, the scoring's tough, but I get you got to start somewhere. I was just wondering, did you happen to push any of the recent CEAs through this model? See how it fell? Because that would be interesting to do. We just did Jocelyn, and we did, pretty painful WEX. So I would think we should be able to push those through this model for scoring. You agree? Maybe of interest, might see if something breaks.
Yeah.
Because they were both approved.
Yeah, I think the WEX one would be the one we'd use because that's an economic development TIF, or CEA rather.
Yeah,
Okay, so I had another question because, like Councilor Gleistein said, part of this also is to get the council involved a little earlier than prior engagements. So I've read this a couple times. Great work, good document, but I still can't definitively determine when the council gets involved. And the reason why I'm saying that is Jocelyn's very fresh in my mind. My bad not knowing about Jocelyn, nobody else, just me. However, in light of workshops and watching videos of the planning board, these guys are so busy. But Jocelyn went through that whole process, used up all those resources before it came to the council. And the council can easily just say no, for whatever reason, didn't like the project, economic times are not right. And then all those resources, all that time had been used really for nothing. So I kind of anticipated seeing in this a lot earlier entry of the council. Not necessarily a vote, but an earlier entry into the council. And I can't find it.
Yeah, I can direct your attention. It's in section 3, step 2. So it's fairly early in the process. And the end of step 2 If an application is determined viable, the town manager shall notify the town council that an application is forthcoming. So,
Yeah, and when is it done? You said appendix C?
no, it's in section 3.
How about a page? Give me a page.
Well, I don't
1, 2, 3.
look for step 2.
There we go.
Yep,
So this is after Sedco and the town manager reviews for viability.
correct.
That's step two?
And I'm also pulling in input from my staff.
Okay, so again, didn't want to beat this to death, but then looking at this, I mean, we've already done code enforcement, public works, and all that work has already been done before the council is made aware of this. There's a lot of work goes on in there. Is that not correct?
Potentially.
Okay. Never mind. I wasn't going to challenge it.
Yep.
My expectations were a little different. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm kind of with you, Ken. I would like to see, if there's an application, the council's at least notified. I think even with Jocelyn, we didn't have the details, but I think, and maybe this was not a great example, but at some point, some months earlier, Chairman Johnson had said, hey, by the way, there's going to be, this project's happening. So, I think there's a step that at least the council could be notified that the town has been approached about a CEA.
Yeah, and to follow that up, in the perfect world, right, we're notified, that's fine. A lot of other people have got a lot of other things to do that are their purview. But it then would be great to get a tickle email to go, hey, this is up in front of the planning board on this date, or this is over here being reviewed by this, at least to give the option for the councilors to jump in on that. So, but that's the perfect world.
Councilor Johnson, this is an issue I struggle with all the time. Your time is valuable. I also don't want to engage you until we have sufficient detail that you can actually, make some sense of the matter before you. And so I think things do need to mature a bit before it goes to council. And I don't say that to keep it from you. I say that to bring you in at the appropriate juncture. And frankly, whether it's me or anyone else sitting in my chair would be a damn fool to advance these things without the knowledge of at least council leadership. So whether it's stated in this policy or not, I think there are other ways to make sure there's general awareness that we're working on something.
Okay, but I would think the exception to that would be something like Jocelyn Place, because that was contingent on a CEA approval by the town council, right?
I'm not sure if that, I don't follow your question that would be the exception.
I'll step back and give it some thought. Thanks for the input on that.
Councilor Johnson, I mean, if you, as you look at the steps, where is there a place you would, or a process you would want to insert somewhere in that process?
Not right off the top, Peter. I thought this being a workshop, I would hear other people's thoughts, see if anybody else thought the same thing, and then maybe drill through it. So,
Just out of curiosity, I'd just like to hear from others what they thought about it. John, Councilor Coolidge, you see your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this somewhat during our finance committee meetings. And the concern, Councilor Johnson, was that we didn't want to open the floodgates, right? And we don't want everybody to feel like they have an entitlement to a CEA from us. We thought that having at least a little bit of the pre-work done by the town manager with some discretion to say, hey, you know what, this isn't worth our time. Or, you know what, maybe, and then he bounces it off leadership. And if it's something, it looks like there's actually going to be an application, then that's the trigger. That's the notification that then the council would be kind of engaged. I think some of that pre-work is healthy to happen below the radar, and that's not necessarily below the radar, but it's that's the way it works. Somebody's going to call up, Karen at Sedco and say, "Hey, I got this project. I need some help. Is there, anything available, and she'll kind of explain it to them, and they'll bounce around the project a little bit. And if it looks like it's worth everybody's effort, then they notify us. Is kind of the way I'm reading it. And I think I'm okay with that piece of it.
Councilor Caterina?
Yeah, and pardon me for not, well, anyway, affordable housing. Affordable housing, do they require the CEAs, or is it just the affordable housing TIFs? Someone remind me.
So if you want a CEA for affordable housing, you have to have a TIF. So mostly
Right.
they go hand in hand.
Right,
So you request an affordable housing TIF
Right.
because you want a CEA. Ours is a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah, the South Portland Housing Authority said they'd never done one in an economic development TIF, which started off kind of confusing, at least to some of us. And so I think if there's another affordable housing project come forward, it's highly likely that it'll be a TIF, and then they only need a TIF if they want a CEA, if that makes
Right.
sense.
well,
Not-
and the reason I'm asking it, the only reason I'm asking it is, has the affordable housing group in town, our affordable housing committee, looked at this? That's all. And is there anything in the scoring that needs to happen in case we do have something that has to do with affordable housing? That's the only reason I ask.
I'll take a stab at that. I mean, I think Tom, mentioned, and again, we struggle with this language. I'll be honest with you, to say that, this only applies to economic development TIFs and CEAs. I think we felt that the steps and things like that could apply to the other things. So, the answer, Jean Marie, might be to go ahead and flesh this out into an affordable housing TIF, because do I think that the scores and the points is different? It's different questions. Absolutely. It's not the same questions. So I think, the steps and how those things go forward and the transparency could apply to that. And then whether or not we grant one, I think would look different, what we asked for. So that's my take on it. But I think it'll work for a little while to get the transparency, the steps, some answers to the questions. But, I think sooner rather than later, we do well to work on that other one. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Hoomer?
A couple of comments about that. I mean, I do remember that, the whole issue was really to, get something in place. But I think that what has been done here has really gone quite beyond just a really basic policy. It's actually got some aspects that are, pretty detailed and pretty specific. I think it accomplishes very broadly the couple of big concerns, making sure it gets on the radar screen of the council, sooner rather than later, and also making sure that we don't burn up too much staff time, energy, and money. That's addressed by the fees. And another thing we haven't really talked about, but a couple of people have touched on it, having a, for large CEAs, for ones 5 million or more, we're going to try to get some outside help on it. So I think that, it accomplishes those basic questions I think were there in the first place, number one, but number two, goes really quite a ways beyond that. So, it answers more questions for me than it raises.
Hey, Karen Martin?
Sure. Just a couple of things. I just want to make sure, since my board is going to be involved in this, we just had a couple of questions too. And starting with under rules and conditions, under tax increment financing, number one, there are a couple of places where it probably should be CEA versus TIF, but those are all separate from substance here. But I wasn't sure that we understood the difference between bullet 1 and bullet 2. So I just wanted to ask that. And then we have another question with regard to the steps. So to me, bullet 1 and bullet 2 are saying the same thing. So I think I'm missing something in the translation. So we just want to make sure we understand.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. They're certainly closely related. The second one refers to the public benefit.
Yeah.
Whereas the first one really refers to projects that we would likely or might do by ourselves through a general fund or capital budget.
Okay, it's just a little bit awkward, and I wasn't sure if that extra phrase of "but did not do so," we weren't quite sure what that meant, whether there was something that we were missing in that.
Oh. No,
I mean, if the intention is just that it's going to be, this is a normal public infrastructure project that's under the town's purview.
That was the intent, but
Okay.
yeah, that language, but not did so, simply means that though it's a project that we might or wish to fund, but we haven't. Yeah.
Okay.
It is a little
Okay.
awkward.
Just wanted to make sure there wasn't something that we weren't understanding. And then the other question we had was really about when there's discussion of in step 6 of forming a negotiating team to include a town council member. It feels that that's really late in the process because we've done step 4 and 5 really talk about preliminary terms and things like that. It just feels like we're defining a lot of material about the terms, and then the negotiating team is appointed in step 6. So that may need to be moved up a bit, or there should be a council liaison point person in the TIF process. So just pointing out, we could put that up earlier.
Just step away for 5 minutes. I apologize. I'll be back.
What do others think about that? I mean, I think it's similar. The rationale was kind of similar to the others, that to kind of let the process run through when it finally gets to the final sort of negotiation phase. That's when a representative from the council would be there. Do others feel that a town council member should participate much earlier?
Yeah, I go on this. I mean, I'd leave, if you just use Wex as an example, I mean, we got involved in that. But I think we probably could have gotten involved in it sooner as a council, and as a couple of members of council. So, I mean, I realize that this is a balance because you want to allow enough time for the seed to germinate here before you get a lot of people hovering over it. But if there's an error, I think it'd be best to do that on the front end, over notifying it, or involving, and then stepping back if need be, rather than we're rushing. But I felt in both of those we were playing catch up, Wex as well as Jocelyn, for different reasons. And again, I don't know that this, the policy will prevent that from ever happening again, but it might be less of a chance of that.
Your hand?
Yeah, I think the distinction here, I hear what you're saying, Karen, is that, an applicant, I think, has a right to ask for what they want to ask for. And it could present some problems if it's materially different than what we're willing to do. But I think that's the distinction that's trying to be drawn here, that the applicant can come forward, the modeling is done based on what the applicant's asking for. Hopefully staff has been able to help interject some input in the early phases. But then at some point that the council, before it comes to the council in, formally, would sit down and negotiate the final terms.
Mm-hmm. I just wasn't sure. In step 5, for instance, you've got revise and renegotiate with the applicant as necessary. So, and then in step 6, we're now renegotiating again. So I wasn't sure whether or not maybe it could just be moved up to step 5.
I think it's worth looking at before we vote on the final, like looking at the timing of that. I agree with Karen and Don on that.
Okay.
And I guess one more just suggestion or question. In the document, we talk about the application fee or the retainer, if we will. And then the discussion is if we, or the policy says if we're not going to use that, then the retainer gets, whatever portion we don't use is refunded to the applicant at the conclusion of the project. So that could be 30 years down the way, if, depending on how you define project. So my suggestion might be once a application is approved and a CEA is signed, if the retainer was for the review of the project, it could get returned at that point.
It says when the construction project is completed, so that's not at all the entire CEA term.
Depends. If it's a phased project, like what point would you consider, like if something that's a 10-year project to be built out over time with
That's fair
different
enough.
phases. Yeah. And I think it's the distinction. If the funding was reserved for, like the fact that they were going to finish the project or something else, this fund is specifically for the review process.
Karen,
So
what
if you're
about,
done with the review process.
yeah, what about at the council vote?
Yeah,
Voted
or
up,
signing.
the money could be refunded, or,
Right.
I don't know. That's just a thought off the top of my head. I'm
Yeah.
not married to that.
Right. I would say sign, at the signing of when both parties have signed.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
because by then it's gone through legal again, and yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. It's definitely worth thinking about that for the final.
Any other counselor comments or questions? Councilor Blue.
Sorry, was it me?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say I've been hot and cold on this because we're taking something that's by its nature very non-standard and trying to standardize it. And I will say that I think it does a pretty good job of creating some transparency in terms of this is how it comes to the table, right? And it gives some discretion to the town manager to kind of work the process before it gets too far. So I like the stepped process. I think getting SEDCO and the town council together to have a discussion about the project before it gets too far is probably a good idea. Some of the, with the scoring, I'm more cold on because I think it assumes or presumes that you have perfect foresight. And it's hard to anticipate what you might be judging a future project on. Times are dynamic, they change. So I'm less in love with that. But all in all, I think in terms of creating some vision into the process of how these things come to be, I think it does a pretty good job of that. So, and I know it was a long haul to get there.
Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, this is, a little bit of a build on, John's point there, but I'm kind of wondering, how, if this is a policy, how does it get memorialized? Does it become an ordinance, or was it a policy, something that's, a guideline that's not as enforceable? It's a governance question.
Well, I'll take a study. Don, as a policy, it really was meant to be kind of just a guidepost to how to kind of bring some structure and process has just been outlined to the process. Not sure we wanted something as binding as an ordinance, which then restricts some of the flexibility. So I think we kind of look at this. This was kind of a work in progress. It really was trying to address the need. We really didn't have any structure about how to approach this and evaluate it. I think as Councilor Chair said, it kind of at least starts a process that we can modify as we go forward and we learn more and maybe at some point codify. But I think when we initially took it on, I didn't think that the goal was really an ordinance. It was more of sort of where we've landed, but certainly open to other views.
Great, thanks. Thank you.
Councilor Paul Johnson, Chair.
Yeah, I view this as, this is a town council policy, right? It's not an ordinance it's not a town-wide ordinance, so to speak, but it's one of our policies that we operate under. So that, I guess that would be my take on Don's question. And then it's a little nitpicky, but if there's a way to, the scoring exercise, I agree with Councilor Clucci, but I also think it's a good exercise, right? So we're always looking for stuff to just, for topics of conversation and try to, as Betsy said, try to quantify something that's subjective. So something nitpicky is maybe we drop the word criteria and just call it something else, right? Because it's not, I mean, what I'm hearing repeatedly is that it's not really the criteria. We just want to go through that exercise. I don't know, a criteria would suggest that we're going to measure it against a benchmark and say yes or no to it. So I guess, it's something silly, but that might help John and Don and myself's thoughts of, it's more of an exercise than as a criteria. I think it's worthwhile doing, but I'm with John in the sense where it's more of an exercise than something I would be willing to make a complete decision on, I guess, which I think we all have clearly stated we wouldn't make a complete decision based off this exercise. So those would be my thoughts with scoring.
Right. Like I said, it started off with just questions and they have to answer the questions anyway. It's just, how well are they meeting that? I personally, think that this is I think over time you'd probably adjust them, change them, add to them maybe if it comes up that much. But I'm sorry, something else you said, Paul. I think in terms of policy versus ordinance, Don, my personal opinion is when you work on things like this, you definitely make them a policy first and you use them and see what happens. Now, I guess we're being pretty optimistic here, thinking we're going to be getting all these economic development requests, but hey, let's hope so. And then, from there, you could make it a policy, an ordinance, once you've kind of fleshed it out, or you could take some part of it, that at that point, if the residents came forward and said, no, if it's more than $10 million, we say, no, we want that as an ordinance. So there could be pieces of it, in my opinion, but it's certainly the previous finance committee started it, was to get something in place. And I think that's really important. And I think one of the reasons that hasn't been mentioned tonight of why that's important, as well as some type of we don't want to call it a scoring, but, as well as some type of an objective way to look at things that are important to the values of the town, so that we have a document that we can go back and fill in. Step 1, this occurred on this date. Step 2, this is who was involved. We will have a documentation tool. So if a council changes over, or a finance committee changes over, or residents want to see what we did, we've got the steps in place. It's not just, well, these guys are getting favoritism, these guys don't get favoritism. No, people went through the similar process. These are the dates that it happened. These are, who was involved. This is what was discussed. There was the meeting related to step 4 that occurred. Right now, I think the ones that we did, were largely driven by PowerPoints. And government by PowerPoint, quite frankly, drives me personally crazy because it's really hard to go back and figure everything out. The PowerPoints are hugely helpful, but I think a framework around the presentations and the PowerPoint is really helpful. Sorry, I'm going to mute because that's my other line.
So as we kind of wind down the hour, Chair Johnson, are there anybody queued up that wanted to speak from the audience?
That's a good question. Let me check. Does anybody in the audience like to speak? There's 3 people in the audience. One of them's Liam. I'm going to assume he doesn't want to speak. So, nope. I think we're good there, Peter. So
then, as we sort of, Tom?
Could I just make a quick point, just to tag on that the final conversation, policy as opposed to ordinance? I strongly encourage you to keep it as a policy and thereby have some flexibility. We can't possibly envision all the possible things that may come your way, and I think it'd be tragic for you to be bound by an ordinance and not be able to do something that you want to do otherwise. So I think a policy gives you the flexibility. What it also does is it tells the public that we've got a process and we're going to here's the steps and you can follow along if you like. It tells the development community, this is what's expected of you. And I think that sort of predictability and consistency is huge. It also says this council is really suggesting to future councils that this is a good practice. They may choose to have different priorities in Appendix C in their scoring system, but I think it's a good practice for you to indicate to future councils that this is it's good to have a process, whatever that might be. So I think there's a number of key points served by this, but I do encourage you to keep it as a policy.
So some really quick, Councilor Johnson? Yeah.
Sorry, because you were doing a great job of wrapping it up. I'll blame that on Tom. One thing we might want to add in here is just that an electronic file stored in a commonly accessible area is created for each one of these steps. Because I think one of to Betsy's points is, I think we have a continued frustration of, man, I'd like to click a button and just see the chronology of WEX or see the chronology of the downs or what have you. So maybe part of this policy is that it needs to be put in one place that's accessible to all parties involved. Because if we're gonna really tie this to a step process and be able to go back and look at it, I'd love to be able to have that. Then 6 months down the road, have to keep emailing the town manager and say, hey, give me this, give me this, give me this, right? So I think we can improve on it that way. So that's my final comment. Apologies.
So some real quick, just housekeeping items before we close. Circling back to everybody's conversation. One, I don't think we closed out or just kind of show of nod of heads of ever. Tom made a suggestion to increase or include wording, said that there's no minimum score. Do people think that's a good addition for the next round, or are we good with the current wording? Any reaction either way? Okay, not seeing any reaction.
I thought that Paul's suggestion would have covered that same thing as well, if you remove the criteria.
Oh, okay. So another question I had, if we remove the criteria and said something like decision-making guide, credit enhancement agreement, decision-making guide, does that read better? Everybody's comfortable with that? Okay, so that was great suggestion. So wording, we got notification. Councilor Ken Johnson, I think you're thinking about that. Didn't know if you were comfortable, if everybody's comfortable the way it is, or not seeing much reaction. So Councilor Ken Johnson, I think you said you wanted to kind of just have some time. So there'll be some time to let us know.
We're good. We're good.
Third thing that was suggested to see if folks, the suggestion was made that maybe we should run a test case through the scoring matrix. And I think Tom suggested we should take a look at, Tom, what did you suggest? You suggested WEX, right?
That's the most recent one that would apply.
Folks think that that's a good exercise?
Yeah.
See some head nodding. Then I think Karen Martin suggested from SEDCO that we move up to step 5, the town council individual involvement. And I saw some head nodding around that. Is that generally okay? It was just getting the town council member involved a little earlier in the process.
Yep.
Okay, that looks good.
I have a comment on that one, actually. Maybe if this is a negotiation team, maybe that it's linked to appointments and negotiations somehow, so that there's a standing council member that's involved with that type of work. I don't know that it needs to be, because where would we meet, or would the chair appoint it maybe? I guess trying to follow through how that would happen.
Yeah, I think at one point we thought it may be someone on the finance committee. So I'm not sure. It probably makes sense to maybe designate where.
Well, I think I personally would leave it open, because things come up sometimes that different counselors have some sort of an affinity for, or,
Okay.
it could be something that, somebody's say it's something with the tourist industry, John, we might say, well, John's got a lot of experience on that and he's got a lot of knowledge, but he's not on this particular committee. I think it fleshes itself out a lot, but that's just my opinion.
I'm a strong second of what Betsy just said. I think you utilize the strengths and interests of the current council members.
And time capacity, one of you might be able to devote time and others can't.
Time
Okay.
and yeah, absolutely.
So those changes we just sort of went through, are then folks comfortable with where we are?
Karen had that one to kind of combine those 2 bullet points that were almost the same. Did Tom think we should do that, or?
Yeah, I can find a way to combine those two.
Okay.
And then I think the only other thing, and I'd have to go back through it, but I think Karen mentioned that maybe we still use TIF when we should have used CEA. I do think that's worth going back through that. And Karen,
Consistency.
if you have one, if you have something, ones specifically where you think we should change it, I think getting that straight is very important. So,
I'll coordinate with Karen on that. I caught a couple of those as well. So
okay, yeah.
we can provide you a straight through and underlined version that will show the changes from tonight. So you'll see them very clearly. The other one that Karen mentioned was just further clarity on the application fee in the event that we have excess funds.
Oh, yes.
for the
That's right.
retainer.
Yeah.
I think she's probably right. It's clear to tie it to the CEA approval
Yeah.
because that retainer there's no need to expend any additional funds once the CEA is approved, right?
Right.
Everybody agree? Everybody
Yeah, I would
comfortable with
say the legal agreement's signed, but we usually have the legal agreement prior to the vote because we know what's going to be in the legal agreement. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. But yeah, I think the approval.
Okay.
types-
All right, good. We'll make that change and you'll see it.
that? Right. Well, thank you, everybody. It'll eventually come out of committee at some point, I'm hoping.
I think we're still going to vote on it in 2 weeks without, if I'm not mistaken, these are some pretty minor adjustments.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking to change the date. So
The only thing I can't commit to, I'll do my best, is to run the WEX through the model and see what that result is. But I'll make every effort to do so.
Oh, and Tom, excuse me. And then the other thing I think actually was Jean Marie's point, which I don't think I addressed, was getting at least a legal look at it to see if there's anything.
Yeah, I can accomplish that.
Contrary to state, yeah.
Yep.
was there no appetite to put a requirement for a shared electronic folder in there?
Oh, no, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's fine.
Is that shared with the public, with the council? Just want to be clear.
That's a good question. I'd probably say council and administrative task and SEDCO to be, let's say, available to the public as soon as council sees it for the first time, or maybe pin it to like the first time that we workshop it or something, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So step, whatever that joint workshop between SEDCO and the town council is, we can pin it to that and say, make it public at that time.
That works.
Is that step 2? Is that step 2? No, step 4. So at that time, it'll be made available to the public.
Hey, Paul, really quickly, are we staying on this?
Yeah, nothing's changing. Yep, thanks for asking. Yep. I just did it last time because there was about 30 people in that first workshop. So.
Okay, so I guess with that, I think our workshop's concluded and we'll, in 4 minutes, move to the town council meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Don, our people aren't dropping off. We're staying right on here, right? Yeah. Okay.
I got no place to go, so I'll be here.
Well, I wasn't sure if there's another address we're supposed to sign into. Okay.
I think this is the one.
Could someone kick me off? I don't think I can kick myself off.
I think Paul will when he comes back.
Yeah, you'll have to wait for Paul, just 2 minutes.
Paul, can you kick me out?
I sure can. Get out of here. Tom, before I get started, should I read Phil's opinion before the public hearing or before our action? Just because there's two different agenda items.
Action, I think, is where it's most appropriate.
Yeah, me too. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the Wednesday, October 21st, 2020 Town Council, regular Town Council meeting of Scarborough, Maine. I will call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
And item number 3 is roll call. Tom?
Councillor Clucci.
Here.
Councillor Hayes.
Here.
Councillor Gleisteen.
Here.
Councillor Katarina.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Hamel.
Here.
Chairman Johnson.
Here. Item number 4 is general public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Is there any comments from members of the public for items that are not on the agenda? Okay. Item number 6 is approval of the minutes from the October 7th, 2020 Town Council meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Tom?
Councillor Clucci.
Yes.
Councillor Hayes.
Yes.
Councillor Gleisteen.
Yes.
Councillor Katarina.
Yes.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes.
Councillor Hamel.
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is adjustment to the agenda, and we don't have any adjustments to the agenda tonight, Mr. Hamel.
True.
Item number 7 is treasurer's warrants. I signed those, I believe, last week. Item number 8 is the town manager's report. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of points of interest. I sound like a broken record, but I want to give you an update on the voting activity. It's, I think, front and center on a lot of people's minds, certainly us here at Town Hall. Just to give you a quick update, as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, we had issued 10,575 ballots to voters, and we've accepted and processed back 8,206 of them. So there's still another 2,300 or so out in the community. I know we've been in touch with the postmaster. There's a number of folks that have requested ballots. We have sent them, and they have not been received yet. So I don't think we can provide a definitive answer as to why that's the case. I will say, though, starting October 26th, we can and will start issuing duplicate ballots for folks that wish to have them. We do expect that might be a very brisk day or two with folks requesting duplicate ballots. So we'll be staffing accordingly to handle any of the unexpected or expected rush. We've also chosen to extend voting hours to include this Saturday morning, and that'll be from 8 a.m. to noon here at Town Hall. This evening, we had our late hours till 6 p.m. Just observing, we had very few coming through, but we thought it was good to expand those hours Saturday morning, so we've made those arrangements. And the last thing, Toadies made arrangements to begin processing of absentee ballots. We actually have up to 7 days before the election to do it. Based on our experience back in July, she thinks she only needs 2 days. So October 30th and the 31st, we'll have six teams of 2, I believe, processing those ballots, and she's quite sure she can get through. If she can't, we always have Monday the following week to do that work. Obviously, we'd like to get all of the early votes, the absentee ballots processed before Election Day. That's our goal, and I'm sure we can do it. Again, my prediction, I think we're on track for maybe as high as a 75% voter turnout, the way we're working at this point. A lot depends on election day. So time will tell. Similarly, another update on childcare. We are really kind of hitting our groove, so to speak. Still, we are challenged getting part-time staff. We did hire one who's working out terrifically well. Full-time staff is stepping up tremendously, really showing the range of their creativity and skill set. And we're really getting a lot of good feedback from participants and parents. We do have some extra additional room and capacity. We do have some students starting in November. Their family situations dictated that they didn't need the care until November. So that, coupled with some additional open houses and some marketing efforts that will be rolling out over the next week or so, we're hopeful to get up to the maximum numbers. But I can report that things are going very well. On the COVID front, I'm pleased to report the little issues that we had. I say little, in hindsight they were, but in both the police and fire department were isolated to the staff that I previously reported to you. There was no spread beyond. Also pleased to report that all folks that had been quarantined as part of that event are now back at work and functioning fine. So I really feel as though we've dodged a bullet. It was a huge reminder to us that we need to just redouble our efforts, not doing anything different, but just doing what we all have should be doing, frankly. So I'm going to be offering some similar comments through a leader article to the community, just encouraging vigilance as we enter the holiday season and have the tendency of gathering even with family members. There needs to be some precautions taken. So Maine continues to do quite well comparatively to a lot of the others, almost all other states. But there's some frightening warning signs on the horizon in our country. So I hope that everyone is heeding that warning and going to be doing everything they can to protect themselves and their friends and family. We have entered the so-called stage 4 of the governor's reopening of Maine's economy. And that really pertains predominantly to the restaurant and the bar industry. That, coupled with the council's recent action to extend your flexibility for outdoor seating, we hope will be effective in our local economy and allowing some restaurants and establishments to stay open. I'm not sure if they'll all take advantage of it. I think it's really a case-by-case basis. And I know Karen and others on staff are assisting businesses as we speak in kind of that evaluation. But I think it was really important for the council to have taken that step and in doing so, provide the flexibility to businesses who want to do it. And Karen, through SEDCO, is doing some good publicity around round 2 of the economic recovery grants that are just being released. So I credit her with really doing a lot in the business community. And this is just the most recent example of that. I wanted to foreshadow an issue that I expect will be before the council at your next meeting. You may recall during the budget discussions, one of the capital projects the school brought forward was the construction of a school storage building. And that was really to enable space that they're currently using within the walls of the high school to make it into classroom space. As you may be aware, Scarborough has been awarded now 2 rounds of COVID relief funding. And in the second round, they did put in a request to fund a similar building. And they just found out Friday last week that was funded. The catch with all of this is that the monies need to be expended. And in this case, the building open and operational by the end of December. So there's an extremely tight timeline. The issue that comes to council in front of council is that their proposal is to place it on the old water tank site, which is proximate to the high school, and it's technically a town-owned property. And so I think they do need council approval to do so. And at this point, I've discussed it briefly with town council leadership. We'll talk about it in more detail, but I wanted just to flag the issue. There's a lot of work for them to get done, including going to planning board for an advisory board advisory opinion. So at this point, it's not certain that they're able to accomplish all of this in the short time frame, but I wanted just to alert you to the possibility that you'll be talking about it and considering some action at your next meeting. And the last thing I'll just mention and highlight is our ad hoc committee solicitation process. We're still open and underway. I think we need to probably do a little refresher with social media. It's been a little stagnant over the last week or so, but we do have 17 folks for the downtown committee and 8 for charter at this point. And that will remain open through next Friday, the 6th. We're on a schedule to have council to meet and consider, kind of do the selection on the 11th of November, with hopefully appointments coming at the November 18 meeting. So these committees could be fully functioning starting in December, presumably.
So Tom, next Friday's not the 6th, so there's a little more time then.
Yeah, and you know, that deadline is not hard and fast. We're just trying to have a timeline to bring this through council. I beg your pardon. I'm quite sure that what is a certain date is November 11th. So we'd have to have it the week prior to that, whatever that
Okay.
date
Yeah,
is.
no, I just said, you said next Friday. Next Friday would be like the 30th. So I think folks have got a couple of weeks there.
I beg your pardon, correct.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, that was my only question.
Yep, no, you're exactly right. I guess
And November 11th is Veterans Day.
we can talk about, this would be a special meeting of council, so that's just a date on the calendar the leadership team has put together. I think
Yeah.
that there's flexibility there.
I just wanted to throw that out since, you know, it's a
Sure.
town hall is closed and whatever, so.
It's envisioned to be an executive session of the council, so you can have an open and candid conversation about the candidates. So I think we have flexibility as to when you have that. Good point.
And we could do it remotely, so under the current rules. So, and although I think we discussed it's probably more practical to do it in Tom's room because last time it worked quite well. Well, that's right, Gene. We'll figure it out. Let's deal with this on a different basis. So,
Point being is I'm pleased we're up and running. I'd love to get these committees staffed with their citizen appointments so we can undertake the work. Thank you.
hey Tom, quick question. Can you just because when you say the word duplicate ballot, I'm sure that some people's hair goes up on the back of their neck. So can you please walk us through the audit process and why a duplicate ballot under no uncertain terms means somebody's voting twice, just so everybody can be clear?
I'm not the authority here, and I'll certainly have Tody speak to it, but I assure you there are very strict procedures that includes the voter providing a reason for needing a duplicate ballot. In this case, I think the majority of those reasons will be that I've requested it and have not received it. The system is smart enough to know that if, once a ballot is cast, a second one cannot be cast.
They're putting their name and address on the envelope and signing it and sealing it.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes. And believe me, we catalog everyone that comes back in, so we know the date we receive it. There are daily audits that occur here. Staff is held probably an hour and a half after office hours close, doing those daily audits to make sure that the system reflects all ballots received on that day.
And they're literally looking at each envelope, looking at the address written on each envelope and cross-referencing it with who has checked in to vote earlier that day.
That's correct. And so if someone does that and then chooses to show up on election day and try to vote again, the election workers have up-to-date rolls, and they will know that they've already submitted their ballot by absentee.
Thanks. I just wanted to spell it out a little bit. So, yeah.
Sure. And Councilor Johnson, I believe you taped a video that went into some highlights on voting procedure. No,
mine was more of a hype video just to tell people to go and vote. So don't oversell it.
I guess the last thing for hopefully to give confidence and comfort to the voters, our outside drop box is being used an incredible amount. I would say 75% of what we're getting back are going through that box. Many folks feel the need to hand deliver it, and that's fine. We're here to assist them. We do have a permanent security system in place. And so, we have a good controls in place to make sure that that box is being monitored 24/7.
Thank you, sir. Any other quick questions for Tom before I move on? Councilor Caterina?
Yeah, just real quick, that building that the school wants to do, are they looking to do a permanent structure or a temporary from a real estate point of view? I mean, are they looking to put it on a foundation, or are they looking to get something that would be there for a while? I mean, but it's not permanent.
No,
And the reason-
they're proposing a slab foundation, stick built, between 2,000 and 2,400 square feet, fairly similar to the structure that they talked about at budget time.
Okay, and the only reason I ask that is because, boy, I don't know, getting anything built between now and December 31st is like, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah,
I
fair
hate to
point.
say that unless the Voc School or SMCC they can get it in that, from those programs.
I believe they've
So-
already been in touch with local contractors.
Okay.
So your point's well taken. It's going to be
Yeah.
very, very difficult to
Yeah.
accomplish.
Councilor Calucci?
Tom, along the same lines, is this part of the master plan for the campus, or what kind of review, other than an advisory and opinion from the planning board, would this go through? Is there anything that we need to be concerned about?
The documents that are relevant, we do have a master campus plan that I can share with you. I will. It did indicate what it did is looked at all available and currently undeveloped land on this campus. And then it matched it up with at least that known facility needs at that point. This structure was not part of that analysis, the long range facility plan. The only potential need that site was identified to suit would be potentially relocating the tennis courts. Its size and configuration and location really don't lend itself well to much other use, frankly. So my quick response is I don't think we're necessarily going to be harming ourselves in terms of not being able to do other things on that site. I just don't think there are many other opportunities there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, I'm going to move on to order number 20092. Before I do, if you're in the public, just as a heads up, we do have a public hearing on several marijuana licenses, and then we will be making a decision on 4 marijuana licenses separately. So if you are here for the public hearing, I suggest you also hang out for the discussion on the licenses that we're actually acting on. So first, this is a public hearing only, which is order number 20092. It's a 7 p.m. public hearing on the new request for the following marijuana establishment licenses and schedule final approval for Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. Number 1 is Maine Holdings LLC, located at 10 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Number 2 is Calico Cannabis LLC, located at 10 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Number 3 is Grove Street Farms, located at 10 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Number 4 is Shauna Ray Tomlinson, located at 20 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Number 5 is Absolute Healing, located at 20 Snow Canning Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Number 6 is High Seas Provisions, located at 20 Snow Canning Road for medical marijuana cultivation facility. And number 7 is Main Lab LLC, located at 71 Pleasant Hill Road for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Again, this part of it is a public hearing for these 7. And with that, I also have a couple I will read into the record as soon as everybody is done speaking. Liam Gallagher has raised his hand. So Liam, I'm just gonna, do you want to come in? I guess I'll promote you. Come on in, Liam.
Yeah, Paul, just briefly, I just wanted to make one quick edit. The main lab license is actually a medical manufacturing, proposed medical manufacturing license. So
Okay,
just
perfect.
I apologize.
Thank you.
That's all for me for now.
Thank you. Again, I have a couple emails I'll be reading into the public record, but before I do, is there anybody here that's with us today that would like to speak? Just raise your hand. And the way this works is I will unmute you, but I will keep your microphone off and you can speak. Excuse me, I'll keep your camera off and unmute you. Okay, I will read my emails and then I'll circle back to anybody watching just in case. Bear with me, everybody. I need to find the emails. I have them in one place. Okay, here we go. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, sorry, I can't see the screen while I'm reading. Letter number 1, I'm writing in reference to the request for a marijuana establishment license put forth by the business at 10 and 20 Snow Canning Road in Scarborough. I spend much of my summer at my college in, quote, Rest Point on 9 East Grand Avenue, which is just down the road from these businesses. I am very concerned by the smell that is already coming from the current marijuana facility there and would be opposed to any further establishments operating there. In addition, we have also seen an uptick in vagrancy and crime in our small neighborhood this past summer and are concerned that there may be an increase if more applicants are granted a license to maintain marijuana establishments. Although I'm not able to attend this meeting in person, I would like this read into the record for my disagreement of the proposal. That is Mary Ellen Cahill. Letter number 2, we are writing in reference to the request for the marijuana established license put forth for businesses at 10 and 20 Snow Canning Road in Scarborough. Our community Rest Point is just down the road from these businesses, and we are very concerned by the smell that is already coming from the current marijuana facility that would be there and would be opposed to any further establishments operating there. And it goes on to say it's the same letter, but it's written by somebody else, so I'm going to continue reading it. In addition, we also see an uptick in vagrancy and crime in our neighborhood this past summer and are concerned that there would be an increase if more applicants are granted a license to maintain this marijuana establishment. Please read this disagreement into our public record, and this is for the entire board of the Rest Point condo board. So that is not one resident, but that is several. I have one more here. We are writing today to voice our opinion regarding the recent marijuana cultivation establishments in our neighborhood. We appreciate the opportunity to have opinions heard by the council's decision on this matter. With that in mind, we are asking that order number 20085 listed on the October 21st agenda as old business for final approval be held without a final vote until the establishments doing business as Grove Street Collective LLC, Snow Canning Road. Abutters were not previously notified regarding Grove Street Collective LLC requests, so therefore they should not be included in the 6 identified companies at these 2 addresses. We have had a wonderful privilege of living at 10 Beckford Street, Scarborough since February 2007. We have 6 adult children, 10 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. None of them live in Scarborough, but love coming home for, quote, home for family gatherings, holidays, and for numerous parties and events that were hosted at our home over the years. We live in a wonderful, old, family-oriented neighborhood consisting of Bickford and Holly Streets. Although our children are grown, we enjoy seeing the young families who have recently moved in with their small children. Holly Street is especially buzzing with children riding bikes, skateboards, playing tag, and roasting marshmallows. Every home on Holly Street has 1 to 4 children under the age of 12. We know that Pine Point has long been considered a, quote, working waterfront part of town and is known for its hardworking fishing industry. That's what we love and why we purchased our home here. The sound of the ocean surf on a quiet evening, the healing scent of the salt air, the offshore breeze, and even the smell of the marsh at low tide. We've all even become accustomed to the occasional smells of fish, roe, and lobster packing from the old Snow's Cannery and other businesses. It smells like Maine. However, the smell of marijuana that permeates our neighborhood is so offensive, so disgusting, and so intolerable, it often keeps us inside with our windows shut. This is no way to live. Given the unique qualities of our neighborhood, the families who live here, especially those small children affected, not to mention the impacts of tourism and the environment, the marijuana cultivation business would be much better suited in an industrial setting, not a neighborhood setting. We ask the town council to please consider how the marijuana cultivation industry would impact their own neighborhoods, lifestyles, and property values if it was in their backyard, and vote no to the 7 independent applicants requesting licenses for Snow Canning Road addresses. We thank you in advance for representing the voice of our constituents. Respectfully submitted, David Rabideau and Darlene Smith. And as usual, I apologize if I misspoke on any of that. We also did receive, I believe it is 3 other emails in opposition of these licenses. They were not asked specifically to be read into the public record, so I am not. Typically, I read the ones that ask to be read into the public record. With that, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? There is not, so I will close the public hearing. We are now on to order 20093, which is a 7 p.m. public hearing and schedule a final approval for Wednesday, November 4th, 2020 on the proposed TIF CEA policy as recommended by the Finance Committee. And this is a public hearing only, but I would encourage you, if you're watching now, please rewind the video back to the very beginning. We just had a 1-hour workshop on this specific policy. So this is a public hearing only. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? Again, if you're watching the video, there's a workshop on this same video. Please feel free to go back and watch the hour of discussion, and we will be voting. Well, it'll actually be a one vote in 2 weeks on finalizing the policy. Okay, on to old business. Order number, and I apologize. I think one of the emails I read probably should have been read on this order, so I apologize. Order number 20085 is an act on the request for the final approval of a marijuana establishment license from the following establishments: ZGE Botanicals LLC, located at 4 Commercial Road, for an adult marijuana cultivation facility. Daily Provider LLC, located at 4 Commercial Road, for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Grove Street Collective LLC, located at 10 Snow Canning Road, for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. Derigo Enterprises LLC, located at 137 Pleasant Hill Road, for a medical marijuana cultivation facility. So this is, we are acting on this. Before I take a motion, I'm going to let Liam introduce these. And then I also have a quick email from our attorney, Phil Saucier, and then I will ask for a motion and we'll discuss. After I'll give the public an opportunity to speak after that as well. Sorry. Go ahead, Liam.
So just to give the council a brief update, the 4 licenses before you this evening essentially represent batch 3 of what could be as many as 5 batches. I'm beginning to populate applications for batch 5. To date, the council has approved 13 applications. So with these 4, that bringing the total up to 17 licenses to date. All of the ones before you this evening have been vetted by staff, and site inspections have been performed. Actually, some follow-up inspections did occur in this batch, which is why it was so late in getting to the council, but they have been signed off on, and we believe they're compliant with Section 5 of the ordinance.
Thank you. And before I ask for the members of the public, I'm just going to read a quick email from Phil. It says, I'm writing to briefly summarize our conversations regarding the marijuana establishment licensing ordinance. As an initial matter, an application must include all of the information required in Section 5 of the ordinance, including evidence of a security plan, odor and mitigation plan, operations plan, and all the other enumerated submission criteria, as well as a required application fee. If an application is found to be complete by the town clerk, the town council must hold a public hearing. If the application is complete and the police chief, fire chief, and code enforcement officer have all made the determination that the applicant complies with the local ordinance and state law, the town council must approve the application if it meets the ordinance, including the standards in Section 10. An application should not be denied unless it does not meet one of the applicable standards. If an applicant then violates the license or ordinance, the town council can suspend or revoke a license and could also be subject to penalties under Sections 9 and 11. And that just came about. I had asked Tom and Liam to briefly talk to Phil about the order of essentially enforcement from approval to enforcement. So with that, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak? There's none, and I have no problem sharing. Oh, there is, sorry. David and Darlene, I'm going to allow you to speak. You're just gonna have to unmute your microphone.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear us?
We can hear you, yep.
Great,
Okay.
great.
My concern is specifically the Grove Street Collective LLC at 10 Snow Canning Road, which is order number 20-085, is going to be addressed tonight. How many licenses are allowed at each individual address? And how is the council planning for future, if there is odor, like we've been getting all the time, how do you identify which one of these 7 businesses are responsible for that?
Thanks, Darlene. Liam, do you want to try to address Darlene's question?
Sure. So the snow canning facilities, there's actually 2 addresses, and we've actually received 15 applications for what are largely existing and what we understand to be existing cultivation operations. So in having a conversation with the landlords of those properties, they haven't seen an expansion of their cultivation space in almost 3 years. So while there has been some turnover of tenants, the actual space utilized in those facilities for the cultivation of marijuana has not expanded or increased during that period of time. To David and Darlene's specific question pertaining to how are we going to source the odor from one of those 15 licenses, I think that's going to be a real challenge. To date, I think that's something that there's been quite a lot of conversation with the council around the odor concerns, namely around those 2 addresses, those facilities. And we have engaged in conversations with the landlord, and they are fully aware that that is going to be something that's going to be a real significant discussion as we have our check-in. Again, Chairman Johnson's already outlined a check-in and follow-up just after the first of the year with how these performance standards outlined in Section 10 are being complied with successfully or not. So I absolutely appreciate that that's going to be a real challenge. I think that we'll likely have to engage in ongoing discussions with the landlord as opposed to each individual applicant to get a handle on those concerns should they continue into the future.
Thanks, Liam. Darlene, Darlene or David, did you have any other further public comment before I?
I think we're still on.
Are we
aren't
still on?
I think.
Yeah, you are. Sorry. Yeah, I can.
If that's okay. No, that's fine. That's a very large concern of ours. In our neighborhood, we've been complaining quite a bit about the odor. Obviously, we've been remiss and have missed ordinance type zoning meetings. I don't even know why this type of business is allowed in residential neighborhoods when there's industrial space available. So shame on us as neighbors that we've known it's been going on, but we thought all of you were there to protect us from this type of thing happening. So another question, just to bring me up to speed, is there an area in the town of Scarborough that you cannot have a medical cultivation license?
Thanks, Darlene. I'm going to put you back in the audience, and I'm going to let Liam answer that, and then we'll have our discussion.
Point of information. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, point of information really quick.
Yep.
Let me ask you a question. Is it possible to ask David and Darlene a question that is there something that's changed recently in terms of the odor, or is this an ongoing concern over the past several months or even years, or is this new since the new ordinance has passed? So I'm addressing that to you. I'm hoping to get it answered, but
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a fair yes. Yeah, so we'll bend the rules a little bit. And David and Darlene, do you feel like there's an uptick, or is it more of an awareness because it's actually before us now?
I think, in my opinion, I think has nothing to do with being before you. We've been complaining about it from the onset, and now it's even more profound, so that it kind of explains to me if there's 15 different licenses before the board or potentially coming before the board, that means there's probably much larger growth operation, even though the landlord is saying the square footage may be the same. It's my understanding that each growing company are allowed so many plants to cultivate. So possibly that's what we're smelling. Possibly it's the number or the activity, but it's been a good year and a half.
My perspective is that it's been a solid year
Yeah.
of near nightly occurrences.
Yeah.
Prior to that, if you're telling me these companies have been there for 3 years, I was not aware of
No.
that. We never received any information as abutters that this was going on. In the past year, it has been terrible.
Yeah.
And if they have known that there is some odor ordinance or odor, they haven't been abiding by that. So they've been bad neighbors for a year.
Okay. Thank you both. I'm gonna put
Thank
you
you.
back in the audience and I'm gonna try to.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thanks.
So Liam, I'm gonna just since I will ask you as chair a few questions to help clarify from what I just got of it. Where are these things allowed in Scarborough and where they aren't allowed in Scarborough? And can you please explain why abutters haven't known about it for the last couple of years?
Sure. So let me take a try at that. So
Liam, let me rephrase that. I'm sorry. Why the town hasn't notified abutters in the last few years? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So the first question around zoning, the ordinance does prescribe or outline specific areas of town where marijuana operations can exist. And certainly one of those is the Pine Point Industrial Overlay District, which is where I believe the Snow Canning Road facilities are located. So through the ordinance process, the ordinance committee was deliberate in where they thought it would be appropriate for marijuana operations to exist. And it's not just cultivation, also includes manufacturing or testing, although we haven't received any applications for that. So that is outlined in the ordinance. Again, Jean Marie could probably speak to some of the history on that specific subject. With regard to why abutters are being notified now, or more importantly, why they weren't notified previously, under Maine law, medical cultivators, so caregivers, could cultivate their own plants, which is really the origin of this sort of industry and these licenses. And they were permitted to begin operations, and so that's why many of these operations have been in existence for years. And without the ordinance, there was really no obligation because there's no local requirement to notify abutters of these operations. And so what's really changed and why people are being notified now is because these individuals are in the process of obtaining licenses in line with the ordinance. Had the town, and I think we'll probably have some more discussion on this later, but had the town not opted in under state statute to allow marijuana establishments, there would be no performance standards to hold license applicants to. And so the operations could still exist as they have. However, there'd be no notification to abutters, there'd be no performance standards, there'd be no licensing at the local level. And so I hope that it expanded, but I hope that sort of answers the question. What's really bringing this forward, these notifications, is our local licensing process that we're in the midst of.
Thanks, Liam. That's helpful. So I'm going to get this on the floor so we can discuss it. And
So moved.
Thank you. I'm sorry. That was quick. Is there a second?
Second.
Now, hold on. I know we all want to talk. Jean Marie's going to go first because she's the chair of ordinance, and then Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, this was quite a process through the ordinance committee. State laws are really very strange when it comes to medical marijuana versus adult use marijuana. I think Liam covered it very well, so I'm not going to add any more to that. I will say, frankly, that as chair of ordinance, this committee that approved these regulations, that I'm really disappointed in what seems to me, in my own experience driving by Snow Canning Road, is an increase in the odor. I don't go down there frequently, but in the last month or so, I've had opportunity to go down 3 or 4 times to the Pine Point area, different weather conditions, and I will tell you that it'll knock you over. I mean, so I'm very disappointed with this because I never noticed it before. I don't know, like the neighbors, I'm not sure what's going on, what the difference is, but I will put it out there that because most of these growers know me, they sat in front of me for a while, and I'm just giving them the heads up. You got to do something, man, because the licenses aren't going to last very long. And there's got to be something that's got to be done. And whether it's through the landlord or the individual growers, I think all of them need to get together and fix it. Because personally, I think it's an issue. And I don't live there, but I've driven through there, and I couldn't believe the intensity of the odor that I have never noticed before. So that's what my 2 cents worth.
Thanks. Thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, a couple of things, if you don't mind. I want to, it really struck home when I heard them say that they and I understand it, that they feel that this body is there to protect them. The reality of it is that these guys have been growing there. There are no new additions with these licenses, and they could grow there before the ordinance. The ordinance is actually what we put in place to try to protect the residents. It's not that we just allow these guys to go in and do it and weren't thinking of you. That's why we have this ordinance. So there are no new ones. I do believe the process is to let everybody go through the licensing and then in some manner try to backtrack. I want to share just a little something with you. Mr. Councilor Hamel and I went and did a walkthrough of one of the growers. Okay. Very nice gentleman, won't mention his name, his company name. He brought us in and we walked through. Now, granted, it was just one of, I think, 12 or 15, but they're all kind of similar. But he did share some information that I think that it's sometime we should workshop to educate ourselves on these growing techniques. That he said the nature of the business is when they go to harvest the plant, you can imagine they're moved from one room into another room to harvest. And just the nature of that shakes the plant out, throws out all the spores, and really emits the odor much more potent than normal growing. Okay. This individual guy, business, they harvest every month. So if we have 15 in there and they're all harvesting at different time periods, that's why at times we probably get an extra strengthening of that smell, I would think. And I think maybe we just have to educate ourselves on that. I don't know what we could do about it. Maybe they could talk together, maybe try to start harvesting on the same days or on the same weekends. You don't know, maybe mitigate time space a little bit more. I did have one question for Liam, though, if I could. Liam, are you involved in the on-site review?
I am.
Okay, because I thought it was Jay and it's you. Could you just go over, because one of the requirements are odor mitigation. Could you just go over that process, what you look for? And the reason why I'm asking is because the one that Councilor Hamel and I went to, they had no external air out, push out. Their mitigation was to contain the smell in the building, which was, I thought, very novel. So what is that process on the, what are you looking for to make sure they're complying, at least initially, with mitigating the odor?
Yeah, if I could just take a step back. So what the on-site inspection typically looks like is it's myself along with our fire inspector, generally our code enforcement officer with a background in electrical, and our zoning administrator along with a representative from the police department. And really what we're doing is we're going through and verifying that the application materials that they submitted are indeed accurate to the degree we can determine that. So we're reviewing their security plans, obviously ahead of time. We're verifying that they have adequate surveillance or camera setups. We're verifying that, all the fine print of the ordinance with regard to the security plan, general building code pieces. So this is very similar to a certificate of occupancy would be. So we're making sure there's no fire code violations. And the odor mitigation piece, again, if you review the ordinance, you'll see that really there's a performance standard that needs to be met. The ordinance doesn't have specifics as to how that is met. So it doesn't speak to internal ventilation versus external ventilation. It doesn't speak to any sort of magnitude or specificity around equipment. So essentially what we're doing is we're asking them through the inspection to say, what do you have for odor mitigation systems in place? Can you point them out? Do they appear operational? But really what's going to have to happen here, and really where this is going to get tricky, is we're going to have evidence to suggest through likely abutters experiences, that whatever systems are in place are inadequate. And then the question is, what do we do then? And so, that's really the extent of it. We don't have a background or an odor mitigation specialist on staff who can go in and determine that the equipment they have in place will indeed be adequate for that facility at that location with, it all is very, there's quite a lot of variables to it. So the initial step is that point out the equipment, we determine it appears to be operational, and from there it's going to be, well, is it in fact operational based on the sort of the anecdotal or reported experience of the abutters. Now we have some facilities that, due to where they lie in town, they don't have abutters in the same way our snow canning facility appears to have. And so the odor emanating from that building may be on a similar level. However, they don't have residential properties within 500 or 1,000 feet. And so simply the experience is different. So that is going to be an ongoing challenge with managing this, or the enforcement of this ordinance.
Any follow-up, Councilor Johnson, before I move on?
I'm good, thank you.
Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I live in Pine Point, and I am very sympathetic to the complaints and comments that we receive from residents. It is a problem. There's no question about it. The part of the difficulty is these have been grandfathered facilities. They were running before the legislation came into effect. And as Liam has explained, it's been very hard for us to try to get a baseline to figure out, where the odors are coming from and where, who has which systems in place. But hopefully by the licensing, we'll be able to establish a baseline. This is not by itself necessarily going to resolve the odor problem. So I expect that this is going to be, it's going to take a while for us to sort our way through this. As Councilor Johnson mentioned, we went through and inspected, very extensive odor mitigation systems in one facility. But there is just a lot of activity. There are a dozen or so people in there, and the level of activity, how that has increased, I have no way of knowing. And I'm not sure we have good data on that either, from any part of the town government or staff at this point. So I know it's not really going to answer the question or resolve it, but I think this is something we need to work our way through and find out, if it will improve, and if not, then what we need to do about it over time. So that's a long answer to a very short question about what we're going to do about odor, but by its nature, it is a very difficult thing to manage. And this area has been a commercial and an industrial zone for some time before marijuana. We had canning facilities there, that were, pretty pungent, and I had relatives who worked there, and also, there's currently continuing seafood processing there. That, in and around the area, that's just a fact of life living in Pine Point. But I understand and appreciate this seems to be a new thing, and does seem to be a bigger issue than it was previously.
Councilor Gleisten?
Yeah, so it's no surprise. I'll be voting no tonight. I've voted no on all of this, and I didn't support the expansion of marijuana in Scarborough. The licenses are being applied for because all of these cultivators will go into adult use growing, and this is part of the law. I agree with Councilor Caterina. It's a very complicated law. For whatever reason, the state did not decide to join together and just say, let's not call this medical marijuana, let's not call this adult use. It is very complicated. So I think one thing for this council is we're going to really have to understand how this works a lot better. Do we have the right to limit the number of plants in these, by each grower? What can we regulate? What state regulations are involved? Is there a state regulation related to odor? Or is that only at the local level? I will be bringing forward an odor ordinance or an amendment to the Good Neighbor because as Councilor Hamel pointed out, this is not just related to marijuana. There were some residents that I have talked with in that area that had lived there for, well, it's a homestead. And so the person has been there for 70 years and family before that. And it only became recent where there was a problem with one of the canning facilities causing odors that it never had before. So I don't think we have to just pick on, the marijuana, but to me, the property owner, the landlords, in this case, in that other case, the property was leased out to someone else. They have the accountability, and the way to solve this, in my opinion, is we get an ordinance in place, and if you're not in compliance, you get fined. That's the way ordinances work. So everyone likes to think that odor is very subjective, and it is, but I think there are some things we can put into place that will turn subjective data into something objective that we can consider for fining. And again, it won't apply just to marijuana. It would apply, to other parts of town. I understand, the letter you read from Phil tonight, Paul, so basically Phil said, we have no right to turn down any of these licenses if they meet all the criteria. I do think legally that is correct based on my understanding of the laws, which I haven't looked into for a while, but as folks probably understand, I spent quite a bit of time on this when I first became a counselor. However, our same town attorney allowed us to put this in the ordinance that we would vote on these licenses. So I think that gives us at least the leeway to table when we aren't understanding what's going on exactly, when we don't have the level of detail. I think, Councilor Johnson said, it's the same number. I don't know that we know that. I think Councilor Hamel expressed it much better. He said we didn't have a good baseline to start. And I think that's absolutely accurate. We don't totally know what's going on. I think Liam expressed very well, they're not experts in a lot of things. There's a lot of things to be learned about this new business from a state and a local level. And so if there are issues, I think we can slow down. I think we can table. I think we can vote no. Again, the same town attorney signed off on us putting a vote in this. So I'm not sure why he didn't bring forward, well, you could vote, but it won't mean anything. So in my book, it does mean something. I voted no on all of these. I will be voting no again tonight. I urge other people to vote no, or at least we table it until we get to the bottom of some of these issues, because I don't really think it's an answer to say we're just going to keep letting it go and figure it out later. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Clucci?
Yeah, Paul, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to share a bit of our conversation this morning and yesterday, because it helped to give me a little clarity into the process and kind of where we are. I think, Betsy, to your point, we can do whatever we want. You can vote how you want. I don't think anybody can, control how you vote, but there can be repercussions to how you do it and how you approach it. So I actually do support moving this forward, and kind of where I was complaining to Paul yesterday was, how can staff be coming to us saying these are meeting all of the performance standards when we're getting all these complaints about odor down the road? And it didn't really click for me until I realized that when you're going for the application, you can't really judge whether they're complying with the smell performance standards, because technically they're not licensed yet. Once they're licensed, then they could be in violation. And I think the way I'm interpreting our ordinance is that the growers at Snow Canning Road that we've already granted licenses to are now out of compliance with those performance standards. And I think the approach that council leadership has been kind of following is probably a good one for this. And that's, let's get them all licensed. And if they're all, if the problem's still not better, then, the way I'm reading it, they're all out of compliance. And then I think Liam addressed some of the actions that can be taken if that's found to be the case. So I do support moving this forward. And I think Councilor Ken Johnson did a good job of explaining that this is how we're protecting or trying to protect that neighborhood. If we had chose not to go with an ordinance, they could be doing it anyways, and there'd be no no regulations, or we'd have no enforcement arm. So it's a complicated topic. It's a complicated subject. I feel like we're talking way too much about marijuana, honestly, at the council level. And I hope that that's something that we can kind of consider or take a look at for an amendment or a change down the road. There's other things out there that I'd like us to spend some focus on. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? So I'm gonna take my opportunity, just because I get to. I'm gonna share my screen real quick because I think the way I'm looking at this is a requirement to get the license is to have an odor mitigation system. Period. Okay, they have that. We license them. Then because they're licensed, they are then required not to have their odor go beyond the property line. That's when our power actually comes in. And if we look, I'm going to share the ordinance for a second. If we look at these violations and penalties right here, it says any violation of this ordinance, including the operation of a marijuana establishment license without a valid local license and failure to comply with any condition, shall be subject to a civil penalty of a minimum of $100, a maximum of $2,500, and that's for every single day they're out of compliance. So that is a massive fine. So to me, the right play here is you check the box. Yes, they have odor mitigation. Then the question is it good enough? And if it's not good enough, then we take action. I would even suggest after our January workshop, this sounds a little extreme, but as an example, take the January workshop. We could at the next council meeting put every single one of these guys individually up for revocation of their license, and either say yes or no in each and every single one of them. I'm not saying we do that, but that's an example of the power we are then given. Because once we revoke somebody's license and then they continue to operate, they're faced with a $100 to a $2,500 fine from us per day that they're doing that. So, so that's where I am. Logically, we just have to get this thing. Yes, they have odor mitigation, and then the next question is, are they violating? And so that's kind of my long term. I think Don and I have discussed it. That's why we're having this workshop in January. This is certainly not going away. In fact, it's going to be more fruitful once we get these guys licensed and say, okay, what's happening? And I'm sure a few of them are watching this, so I hope that they are aware there's a lot of time and energy on our end spending to make sure they got a fair shake in the marijuana ordinance. Well, now it's time to make sure the residents have a fair shake with the implementation of that. So we're on the other side of this, so to speak, right? We spent hours and hours and hours with the growing community and not a ton except for just some public hearing stuff with the residents. Well, now our role switches from trying to make it work to enforcer. And we need to get to the role of enforcer next. And we're just not quite there yet until they're all licensed. So
And Paul, that's why I made the comments I made.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, come on, we've worked really hard with everyone up to this point. You've heard now there's an issue. So the landlord and tenants need to start addressing this because we are going to we will crack down in January if we have to.
Right.
So
like I said, we can
give them
vote.
a heads up.
We can take 27 votes in January on each one of these guys. But that would go against Clucci's desire not to talk about so much marijuana. Does anybody have anything to add to that before I take a vote? No? Okay, Tom, go ahead. Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're voting on these.
Yes, you are. I thought you were recognizing me for comment. Councilor Clucci.
Yes.
Councilor Hayes.
Yes.
Councilor Gleistein.
No.
Councilor Katarina.
Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yes.
Councilor Hamel.
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. On to new business, order number 20094. It's an act on the following request pursuant to Title 23 MRSA 3025 and the requirements of Section 4 of the Scarborough Street Acceptance Ordinance. Chamberlain Construction Incorporated petitions the Scarborough Town Council to accept the public infrastructure within Phase 3 of the Dunstan subdivision as known on the plan above by the Planning Board on November 19th, 2012. The Town Council accepted the infrastructure associated with phases 1 and 2 of the project and to accept McCann Way and Larry Falls Drive as public ways. Tom?
This is actually a fairly routine matter. At the time of subdivision approval, the developer expresses their interest and intent to construct roads to our specifications with the expectations that we'll accept them. And we have an ordinance that dictates all of those particulars. I can tell you this is an ongoing challenge for staff. There are years that pass. And in this case, I believe nearly all the lots have been built on and fully occupied. So we are anxious to get to this point, and we've done all the requisite inspections along the way during construction, and then now after time has passed to ensure that the roads are sufficient to meet our requirements. And so the matter is before you to formally accept them. And with that acceptance comes our responsibility to therefore maintain that infrastructure. I will say that Angela Blanchette, who is here and can be available if you wish, is working very hard with developers all over town to do this. So you'll likely see a wave of these over the course of the fall and early winter. They're anxious to get this done in advance of snow season. Remains to be seen if they'll accomplish all the particulars that need to be done. But this is a concentrated effort on the part of staff to really move these through and get them to council's attention.
Thank you. Any questions for Tom about this before I put it on the table? Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, Tom, I was just wondering if you could ask Angela, as she's doing this exercise, if she could just track the total road mileage on that.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Would you like that part of the report that comes to you so you have a sense of what the magnitude of the infrastructure is you're accepting?
Yes, that'd be nice.
Sure, we can add that too as a matter of the memorandum that will come with each and every one of these. I think in this case it's 0.4 miles.
Any other questions for Tom? Councilor Hamel?
Yeah, I'd asked Tom some questions on this, and I'm pretty confident this is a pretty routine matter. But I was kind of curious: are these the last streets to be accepted in that development? No,
this probably Angela can speak to it, but it's phase 3 at most. I think it might even be phase 2. So now there's quite a few phases yet to come. And in many cases, we don't want to accept the road too quickly because as lots are still being developed with heavy machinery coming and going, we really work very hard to make sure that we're accepting a pristine product. And Angela works tirelessly to make sure that happens. So there's all sorts of reasons that there are delays for this to happen. But in this case, these roadways are ready to be accepted.
Okay. And then the other question that I had, and Tom, you'd answer this, but it's not a precise response, but obviously there's going to be some expense to the town for doing this. We're going to be plowing streets and maintaining them. So do you have any idea, of what the budget impact would be from this, or from what the competitive acceptance might be, adding in other developments?
Yeah, I mean, it will be incremental. I mean, roads of this length, and keep in mind they're in good condition when we're accepting them. So in the early years, it's kind of incremental to our overall operations. We're not adding staff or equipment per se, but over time that certainly will happen. Internally, we use about $4,000 per mile per year for public work expense. And that can be equated, and then for trash collection, it's $155 per household per year as well. Again, one thing to keep in mind, the folks that purchase homes have a reasonable expectation that these roads will become public as well.
Yeah.
So that's part of the challenge that Angela's often facing, is that we have folks that have been living in their house for years, yet the road is not yet accepted. And that has issues of trash collection, bus stops. There's all sorts of challenges that come with this period of limbo.
Tom, one final point here, and this may not be an easy question for you to answer, but do we expect that is it impact fees, or what exactly from the developers do the town get in the way of funding to help offset the costs associated with us accepting streets?
Impact fees would not pertain to this. The theory is the additional tax revenue will go to support and offset the additional cost to provide municipal services.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Thanks very
Yeah.
much.
And Tom, it does, right? The tax revenue from this particular subdivision definitely does offset these costs of accepting these roads.
Oh, and for certain for public works related expenses, but I think you need to look more globally at public safety costs, at school costs. So this is
Right,
just
but
a
they're
slight,
entitled, whether or not we accept the roads, they're entitled to schools and public
enough.
safety, right? So the, you know,
Fair enough.
yeah, I know, we look at that overall formula, but, you know, I think that, like you're saying, there's a reasonable expectation that people have that they're going to become public roads, and that's the tax rate we pay in town.
Correct.
you know.
Correct. So, and to your point, I didn't mean to be evasive whatsoever. Yes, even with single family residential, there is certainly sufficient tax revenue produced by the development of lots and building of homes to offset these expenses. Yes.
Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, I don't want to derail the meeting, but just there's a couple folks in this, just a little tidbit of information from 97 to 2007. Because of development in this town, we added 56 miles for public works to service, 56 miles. So again, just another key glaring fact that growth is bigger than schools. And I'll end it on that.
No, you won't, because how much tax value did we add? I have to add that, but anyway. Just pull your leg.
This was not an ROI. This was just a statement of fun facts. Thank you.
Well, we'll have to double check to see if that's fact, right?
The one thing I will say, not to be argumentative, but the Crossroads District is a good example. There will be a total of 8 miles at full build out for as many as 3,000 homes and all the associated non-residential uses. So there's something to be said for compact, more dense development to keep those infrastructure costs minimized.
Any other derails before we put it on the table?
I couldn't resist.
I'm teasing everybody. I don't care about anything. In fact, it's not even on the table yet, right? So do I have a motion? Did I already? There's no motion. Right?
No motion.
Okay. Somebody?
So moved.
Second. Second.
I was gonna make Councilor Johnson second it, but any discussion? No. Okay. Tom, you want to call the vote?
Councillor Clucci,
Yes.
Councillor Hayes,
Yes.
Councillor Gleisten,
Yes,
Councillor Katarina,
Yes.
Councillor Johnson,
Yes.
Councillor Hamel,
Yes.
and Chairman Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, on to something very positive. This is order number 20095. It's an act on request to accept a donation from Raz Hamid in the amount of $2,000 for use in the town parks. And I apologize ahead of time if I butchered your name, sir. Tom, do you want to just tell us where this came from, or?
Yeah, I don't really have any backstory. Included in your packet is the letter that was included with the check. I think by my understanding of the letter, this individual happens to frequently use Municipal Park and has been enamored by the care and custody that we've provided. And so much so, he's willing to provide a donation to advance that. So very pleased to accept it.
Let's put it on the table before we talk about it.
So moved.
Let's get some order back in this meeting here.
So moved.
Second, Councilor Gleisten.
second. Yeah, so this is fantastic. I've had an occasion to look into donations to municipalities, and I'm not a tax attorney or a tax specialist, but based on everything that I've been involved with, this is tax deductible for people. So I would, encourage us to look into that as well and send a receipt to this person if indeed that information that I had gathered under a different circumstance is accurate. And I think that it's something that it's fantastic. It's much appreciated and something that we should pursue more often, because I think, if we had a philanthropic effort or committee or something like that, there are a lot of people who Scarborough is their heart, whether or not they're full-time residents here. It might be homes that they had for 100 years in their family, and they are looking for or would be open to, especially if we identify certain improvements, that would be helpful to have funded. So I think it's an effort that we should pursue at some point. As a town and as a council. There's experts out there that do it. I happen to know one. I don't know that she would do it, but this is something that you can see here. Someone looked at it and said, I'm so grateful. This is awesome. This is somewhere that I would like to contribute. And I guarantee you, this person is not alone out there when it comes to our town.
Just so you know, we don't typically send a receipt per se, but we certainly send a letter of acknowledgement, and I think it really serves the same purpose. It serves as a
Right. Yeah.
validation.
The
Yeah.
wrong term, but it should be, and anyone should check with their own tax attorney.
Sure.
It should be tax deductible. So
I believe you're correct.
Councilor Gleisten?
I already talked. Thanks.
No, I'm sorry.
She gets another chance.
I was on autopilot. Councilor Katarina?
I don't know about you, Paul. What's going on? Too much multitasking up there.
I
Anyway.
stopped after the workshop, I promise.
Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to thank Mr. Hamid for this generous donation. I agree with him. I walk in Memorial Park 2 or 3 times a week. I enjoy walking there. I've run into fellow counselors there at times. And I think that all of our parks and recreation areas in town are very valuable. And I just want to thank him very much for that donation.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I'd like to thank him too. I tell you, this actually almost teared me up. I don't know why. If you know, I basically almost live in the park. And I agree with what he says in his letter. Our community service does a stellar job in that park. And just to share something, because I live in the proximity of the park I do, one thing that COVID, I noticed, and it was COVID driven, it was after months of being cooped up in the house with the family as much as we like to, I really noticed this summer, the utilization of our park really went up. And several times when I'd cross the street, there's a little mound over there with a sign, and you can stand and you can actually see the whole span of the park. And to see the dozens of family blankets out just having picnics, and you really notice that our town is really becoming a very diverse town, and which really is something that's long overdue. I mean, the makeup and the mixture of the folks just enjoying the park was quite something this summer. I really enjoyed it. But wanted to thank that gentleman again. Really appreciate it.
Good. All right, with that, Tom?
Councilor Clucci,
Yes, and thank you.
Councilor Hayes,
Yes.
Councilor Gleisten,
Yes.
Councilor Katarina,
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes,
Chairman Johnson.
Yes, and thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Item number 9 is non-action items. There are none. Item number 10 is standing and special committee reports and liaison reports. So please raise your hand if you have one. Councilor Katarina?
Yeah, very quickly, long-range planning. We'll be meeting again November 6th. We are working on getting the comprehensive plan out to public, for public input. And our next meeting, what did I just say? It was November 6th. They don't have the dates yet. We're working on the dates to get public input. In normal times, we'd go around to different parts of town, literally, and meet at the different schools or fire stations or whatever. But with COVID, the plan is to have different evenings and opportunities and even daytime for people to get on Zoom, and potentially I mentioned that they should consider doing a hybrid, some sort of a hybrid thing where people can come in to town hall if they wanted to, as well as be on Zoom. So stay tuned for that, because as you know, we really need to get that out the door. And then tomorrow, ordinance committee is meeting at 4. I've been asked to bring something up about fireworks. So I've got fireworks on there. I'm not sure what will happen, if anything, yet, but at least I want to open the door for folks to begin discussions. And then the big thing is growth management. And there was a whole list of data points. Jay sent us back, I don't know how many pages. I know, Dawn, you were going to read them today. I read them the other day, but it should be an interesting beginning to collect data on what the effects of growth are in town and move on from there. So that's 4 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other committee or liaison reports? No? All right, I have a slightly long one, so I apologize. Number 1 is the leadership meeting is tomorrow. Dawn, I, and Tom I think I've mentioned this, but we have our leadership meeting on Thursdays on council weeks, just because it makes a lot more sense on our end. So I'll hopefully report out to you sometime tomorrow or early Friday. Secondly, which we're going to talk about at the leadership meeting, so excuse me, I don't have all the details. But we have set a tentative date for December 8th. That would actually be a special town council meeting. So we're utilizing an off Wednesday. And that is going to be a workshop with GPCOG, Greater Portland Council of Governments, and a couple transit providers, as long as some representatives from PACS, to just discuss the Downs and how public transport is, the challenges of public transport at the Downs, the benefits, and just the viability of public transport in general, and also the type of how all that can affect growth and how growth interplays with that. So we're bringing in a couple of outside voices, outside perspectives, to just sit around and get educated and hopefully pepper them with some questions. But I think I've mentioned this a couple of times. The date is December 8th, and the refined agenda will be to follow. But again, it's just one more step in us trying to wrap our brain around the regional impact and enormity of the Downs project. I did call Peter Michaud, one of the developers of the Downs, and requested from him, it was a very quick phone conversation. I did request from him if they could do some sort of 5-year projection of number of units that they think they're going to do, residential units. I know we get a lot of input, a lot of numbers from them, and a lot of hype around the commercial growth and all that great stuff that we want. But I think in the GMO discussions, it would make sense for us to have this, to just have their perspective on what they perceive would be their 5-year plan, so to speak. He reported back that he has that, he has 3 years of that done, so he'd be willing to extrapolate 2 more years or take a crack at it. More to come on that. I haven't heard from him since, but I made that call, I think, 3 or 4 days ago. Lastly, I'm going to close the comp plan FAQs on Friday. So everybody get in your comp plan FAQs. It is in the shared Google folder. I will make it public. It is for public consumption once we're done with it. And if you're listening right now, essentially we have a workshop on the comp plan in early November, and I've solicited the feedback from individual counselors. So we just have it all in one place. Once it is finished, I will gladly make it part of the agenda packet coming up. So my 4 things: leadership meeting tomorrow, special town council meeting on December 8th about the regional effects, benefits, cost of the Downs, and specifically transit and growth. Talk to Peter Michaud about getting some sort of forecast on their end of the number of units in the next 3 to 5 years. And comp plan thoughts are closed on Friday. Okay, that's all I have. Item number 11 is councilor member comments. Anybody want to raise their hand? Does anybody have any comments? Councilor Caterina.
Just a reminder to everyone to vote. And I know Tom mentioned it at the top of the hour. Listen to me, I sound like a newscaster. That we are having extended voting and registration this Saturday from 8 to noon. So please, make note of that. If you've been wondering when you're going to fit this into your schedule, let other people know. It's very easy to register and vote. And we do have that special drop-off box in the front of the building, which I'm glad people are feeling comfortable enough using. So no excuses this year, folks. Come on out and vote. Thanks.
Any others? Councilor Gleason? Sorry, I muted you.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mentioned, I believe it was the last meeting, that I was hoping the council would consider expanding these ad hoc committees to include more members. And my reasoning is a lot of the model that we talk about that works so well is the committee for the community center. And there were several subcommittees on that, which made the work very outstanding because they had a small group that could participate in some detailed level work without completely overwhelming the entire committee. So I'm not putting forward anything right now, sure, clearly, but I do plan to ask the chair to help me figure out how to bring that forward. So that is something I want to get out there. Also with the comp plan and long range coming up and in the time of COVID, this is, we've had the last comp plan since 2006. It's quite impactful on our town, our zoning, our ordinances, our quality of life. And so it is unfortunate that we are in the circumstance that we're in, but Zoom, I think, is not a great forum for getting feedback. There are many people who struggle with it, and we even have some staff members who struggle with it. Like Paul, I think you need to give some lessons to everyone because you're like a master of it. Like you're very, very good at it, but not everyone is that good at it. And then on the other end, people struggle as well. So I definitely think we need to find ways to spread this out over a couple of, over more than 1 month for sure, but and kind of see how things are going. A lot of people have some concern about the winter coming. Let's see how that shakes out. But spread out, in a big, tall area, social distance, mask, and, make sure that we're getting some input in person because, there's body language too. There's people raising their hand. There's people wanting to speak more than once. And while this has been a good tool for local government to be pretty much the only level of government that's gotten a lot done, I will say in our defense compared to the other levels of government, it's got its limitations. And so I just think we need to be very cognizant of that. We originally, this was going to come out every 10 years, which would have been 16 and 18. It got put aside. And now I think we need to be very careful of saying, well, we've waited so long on it. Now we have to try to get it out in the middle of, an extraordinary lifetime event. So those are my 2 cents yet again.
I will not call on you immediately afterwards. I'm sorry. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll say more.
Yeah, that's true. Anybody? Nope. Okay, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Tom?
Councilor Clucci,
Yes.
Councilor Hayes,
Yes.
Councilor Gleinstein,
Yes.
Councilor Katarina,
Oh, yes.
Councilor Johnson,
Yes.
Councilor Hamel,
Yes.
Chairman Johnson.
Yes.